You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
Welcome to the Minority Trailblazer podcast, and I'm your host, Greg E. Hill, the culture change agent. On this show, we interview young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation leaders. And I just made the cutoff. It is officially 11/11 here in Durham, North Carolina, and we are uploading this podcast. I'm pumped up. I'm excited. We barely beat it because my computer died on me, and I left my laptop charger at school, so I had to drive all the way to school to pick it up, and then all the way back. So we just now getting it uploaded. But today's episode is phenomenal, and we're breaking new ground. I've never had anybody of Latino descent on this episode, and we have two guests, I repeat, two guests on this show that are killing it in the social enterprise space, that have recently been on the Forbes 30 under 30, like I'm telling you. And when I read their bios, it's crazy. The incubators, the companies that support what they do, and honestly, they're just generally good people with big hearts that are changing things, first in Brooklyn, then in New York, and hopefully in 10 years, the whole United States and maybe the world. So I can't wait to get in their story. But before I begin, I just want to say a couple things. One, if you're listening right now and you have not left a review, make sure you stop right now. Go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We need to get back in the rankings. We got crazy download numbers, but we need those ratings to get into the rankings. Also, I want to spend a special shout out to Elsie Smollock, Clarence Dials, Khadija Stigall, and Dr. Eve Hudson. Y'all been showing me mad love on social media, and I know a lot of other people have as well, but I want to get into a habit of early in the show thanking my supporters. I get all these messages on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. I don't get a chance to reply to them all, but the ones I do receive, I'm thankful for it. I read them and I appreciate them. So please support and tell your friends as we continue to grow. Also, please keep me in your prayers. I'm in semester 2 of my first year of teaching. I got a new group of students. I want to make sure I set the tone. So far, so good. But I'm teaching Excel and Access. Those ain't my strongest courses. And accounting. Those ain't my strongest courses. But luckily, I got a great support staff. Great administration has helped me out. But let's do the math. You got 90-minute block schedule. You have 9th through 12th graders. You have Excel and Access, which may be two of the most boring topics ever. And you got to get them through and get them pumped up excited. So I guess as the culture change agent, I got to figure out a way. So it keeps me up late at night sweating. I'm dreaming about teaching. I'm having nightmares about students. It's crazy. It's crazy. So definitely, please keep me in your prayers. And that's all I got right there. So we're going to jump right into the show. Usually I start off with a long diatribe about my life, but we're going to get into that next week. But right now, I want all the focus to be on our two guests. So let me get into their bio. They are the co-founders of New York on Tech, a 501c3 nonprofit association on a mission to prepare the next generation of technology leaders emerging from New York City. New York on Tech provides underrepresented students with access to development, mentoring, networking, and professional experiences that prepare them for degrees and careers in technology. Their work has been featured in major media outlets such as Sirius XM Radio, Huffington Post, TechCrunch, BET, Black Enterprise, Alley Watch, The Network Journal, and most recently Forbes magazine, where they were recognized as Forbes 30 under 30 in social entrepreneurship. As mentioned previously, they've been co-founded by two people. The first being, prior to New York on Tech, he was a technology consultant for Accenture, and has worked for global brands that include Ernst & Young's, Time Warner, HBO, and JP Morgan Chase. He's been named a 2015 Camelback Ventures Social Innovation Fellow, 2016 Point of Light Civil Accelerated Entrepreneur, 4.0 Schools Launch Entrepreneur, Goldman Sachs Entrepreneur of the Year, Merrill Lynch Growing Up CEO, Morgan Stanley Emerging Leader, and was named one of the 50 visionary men to watch in 2015 by Innovator Magazine. And he's a proud graduate of Syracuse University. And the other co-founder is she's worked as a technology consultant for global brands such as Accenture and Deloitte and has been named an entrepreneur in residence at the General Assembly. JP Morgan Chase. She's also been awarded JP Morgan Chase's Global Enterprise Technology Leader, Morgan Stanley Emerging Leader, Deloitte Future Leaders Apprentice, and one of the 50 visionary women leaders to watch in 2015 by Innovate Magazine. Like I said, that was a mouthful, a lot of awards, a lot of leadership, and that's only the half of it. But we're not going to spare y'all, bore y'all any longer. We're just going to bring these people to the show. They're going to add a lot of value, a lot of impact, and it's going to be a fun show. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Evin Robinson and Jessica Santana to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. We're really happy to be here.
Thank you for that.
No problem. I try to keep the juice, but I was like, all these awards, my tongue was getting twisted, whatever. But oh man, it sounds all good. I'm happy to have y'all on the show.
Most definitely.
Okay, so as customary, as we start every show, we always like to start off with a quote and then have our audience or have our guest share why that quote is applicable and how they apply it to their everyday lives. So I don't know who wants to begin. We're going to flesh it out. I know the last time I had two guests on the show, it turned out great. We're just going to flesh it out, and whoever wants to go first can go.
All right. Sounds good.
So I'll do a self quote. So this is a quote that I actually created myself.
Ooh, original?
It's good. Yeah, man. So I'm waiting for the trademark right now. It's pending. So the quote is, I plan to be a product of my environment, but a product in which my community will be proud. And to essentially give you some context behind that quote, I was given a speech through an entrepreneurship program I did in high school, and they had invited me to for the kind of award ceremony at Goldman Sachs. And essentially, I was trying to think of a theme for, the speech I was going to give. And I was kind of in the high school phase, which is, for a lot of people, a big change in life, right? Mm-hmm. Either, go the wrong route or, try to figure out your route or go the right route. And essentially, I figured out that, essentially the work that I was doing in my community at that time, I had a small business. I wanted to essentially be a figure in the community, but something that my community could be proud of and not, one of the stereotypes that people traditionally thought of when they thought of my zip code of where I live in Brooklyn. So again, I plan to be a product of my environment, but a product of which my community be proud.
Oh, I got you. I know what next speech I got to include set, but I'm gonna make sure I got Evin Robinson at the end of that thing. So you already got the Minority Trailblazer trademark. So Jessica, lead us in.
For sure. So when I was an undergrad at Syracuse, I had an opportunity to hear from the chief Orin Lyons of the Onondaga Nation. And something that he said during his talk was that he stands here as the seventh generation because 7 generations ago, someone cared about him. And I think that quote has lived with me for a very long time. And I think primarily it's because, I want to live a life of service. And I do believe that the reason why I'm able to do the things that I'm able to do is because I've had people bring me along, along the way. It's the theory of lifting as we climb. And so I want to say 7 generations to come, that there's someone that's 7 generations before me that can directly attribute their success or their opportunities to the work that I've been able to do or pathways that I've been able to create. And so very passionate about that quote. And it's been with me for at least I think I would say like a decade now.
Oh, wow. That's first of all, that's some great memory. And second of all, that's really big. And I think I've already touched on some things that we're going to jump headway into this podcast about your initiative, about your heart that drove you to jump into this initiative, because we all know that anybody that's listening, the nonprofit world is not for the faint of heart. And it's not for those, it's a lot that goes into it. So I can't wait to talk about that. But before we get into New York on Tech and everything else, can each one of you paint the picture of your lives prior to prior to this entrepreneurship journey and prior to all this, like, tell us who you really are before all the awards, before all the pressure, before creating these pathways and whatnot, who you were and where you from.
Sure. Nevin, you want to go first?
I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. So before New York on Tech, I was a graduate of Syracuse University who was just starting her career in technology for a really big global consulting firm. And I was doing that in New York City. I was super passionate about finally, getting to do what I studied. And I had recently graduated from my master's program in information technology. And I was working with clients in financial services and federal agencies. And it was very rewarding work to be able to be a part of projects and you actually see them come into fruition. So my specialties were in product management and design. And I was super ambitious about this digital space. And so a lot of the things that I worked on were digital redesigns, mobile app designs, and, being able to work with some of the finest people and some of the smartest people I know was a really humbling experience. And I would say, like, from a qualitative standpoint, I was just this very ambitious 20-something-year-old with her eyes really, really big, trying to take over the city. But I think a lot of what I experienced at my firm and at my company and, kind of the reflection you do when you start a career really inform you about what your next step should be. Hence, throughout that process, the creation of New York on Tech.
And also, can you talk about a little bit about kind of growing up and your socioeconomic status growing up? Because I think that will put some flavor and context too into New York on Tech.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up to two immigrant Puerto Rican parents who gave everything up in the island to come to the United States to live what it is to be the American dream and provide their children with opportunities. So I was the first in my family to graduate with a 4-year college or university degree. I was also the first in my family to get a master's degree. And I basically am kind of paving the way for what the Santana name is going to mean in a few years. But I think that, came from very humble beginnings, but beginnings that have definitely showed me, what my values are, what kind of character I want to have, and then also what kind of impact I want to leave in terms of what my legacy will be. And so very humble beginnings, but super appreciative for those experiences because they really show you who you are and they really reflect in, how I decide. They really reflect in how I decide to show up.
Okay, great. Now, Evin, give us a little backstory about yourself.
Yeah, so I'll touch at top first in regards to what Jessica started in regards to like professional career. So similar to Jessica, my career path started on the same track where I was working as a technology consultant. Particularly, I was always focused on investment banks and financial institutions. So helping them with a lot of large programs and products and the development of a lot of technology projects from the whole scale, from apps to websites to databases, the whole spectrum of different kind of tech when it came particularly to investment banks. So that's where I started my career. Before that, the younger Evin, I was just a regular guy from the 718 from Brooklyn. I think growing up, I always knew that I was ambitious and that I wanted to do a lot of things. I think it was just as you get older that the vision becomes more clear. So I always had like that hustle and that drive inside of me. That I felt burning, and always knew I wanted more past what I seen, around the blocks that I was growing up in. So that was always kind of the ambition behind me. I think, you touched on the socioeconomic background aspect. I came from what people would consider one of the toughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, along with Jessica. However, I think growing up, I didn't see the value that it's installed in me as a business professional. And I think that's something to draw on. That's important. Like a lot of the things that I learned growing up, I think helps me a lot today in business in the sense of learning how to read people and trusting your instincts and your guts to really just being very, entrepreneurial minded and very creative on the spot. to, just wanting more out of life. So I think a lot of those lessons that I learned very early on, growing up where I grew up, it's been something that's allowed me to propel my career both in the corporate world as well as the nonprofit space with New York on Tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And before we get into, as we segue into the creation of New York on Tech, and then this probably question will help us segue there, because I've hear a lot about, I hear about it all the time, and I see it. I've read it on journals and scholarly articles and whatnot about this thing of grit, and those people that come from, say, urban environments. I grew up in an urban environment, and they have this, and people would say they already have this grit installed, this savviness about them, and if applied properly would transfer great into the business world and all these other things. But as a teacher myself, as well as a person that's constantly been in classroom speaking in educational systems, there's still a huge gap, because it's easy to say, well, if the kid knows how to sell drugs and do all this other stuff, then if he could just redefine or redo his interests, then he will be amazing X, Y, and Z. But getting that student to change his mind in between and utilize that to do something else, that is where the hard work and the sometimes the luck comes into play. Like Jessica said, those 7 generations, having somebody in your corner to help redefine how to utilize that skill set better. So I guess to segue to New York on Tech, what do y'all believe from what y'all have experienced in your own personal life allowed y'all to take the natural stuff y'all have learned through maybe adversity that you had in your family, maybe adversity that you've seen all around you in New York growing up? What differentiated y'all? Because I know there might have been others out here that had ambitions about going outside the block and seeing other things. But what do you think specifically changed or grew in y'all to really make that next step forward? Because I think that's pivotal for maybe our education, our people that's in there that work with students and whatnot. Maybe some things that we can look for or try to work on with the students that we serve.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, I think even growing up in one of the roughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, I never saw it as a trap. I saw it as an opportunity. And I think that when you get to a point in your life where everyone around you, your parents, your family, people in who care about you, who didn't necessarily have a lot of opportunity, when they tell you that you literally can live your life by decision and not by default, that changes the kind of perspectives and the kinds of ways that you see your circumstances. Like, sure, I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and sure, like, it was very difficult to grow up in under-resourced schools and may not have had access to the relationships or the mentors or the information to get me to make really good decisions all the time. But I also saw that as an opportunity for me to learn, right? And so what I didn't know, I supplemented through Google and through the internet. And what I wanted to find out, I used to go to the library and ask. And I think one of the things I would say that I'm proud of is that I'm a very resourceful person, and I also don't see anything as a challenge. I really see everything as a learning obstacle, and I think that once that obstacle is something, so you can climb over any obstacle, but you definitely just have to put your mind to it first before you think you can jump over it. And I think that's not enough advice. That's not like the advice that's going on around right now. Like, anyone, no matter where you're from, talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not. And I think when you show people that they can create their own opportunities, leveraging the skills they already have, then, you put them in a frame of mind of thinking that anything is possible to achieve with hard work and dedication.
Oh man, you dropped 2 good gems out there. Thank you for that. You want to add anything to that, Evin?
No, I think I would add that, few things that I've come to notice throughout life is that, no matter what's going on, like in your household, what's going on in your community, what's going on in your school, like, you can really overcome those things. And one thing I used to hear people say all the time that I really didn't kind of get keen to until I got older was that, like, hey, this is mental, right? Like, first it starts with your mental, and then if you could, really improve the way you view things or the way you think about things, you could really change your life. And that's actually true, right? Like you could go through some of the toughest times, but it's like, how do you look at those scenarios, right? A lot of times people look at scenarios just as disadvantages instead of it looking at it as like life lessons or an opportunity to learn something or a way to build grit or a way to build just experience that's going to allow them to get ready for the next thing. You know, the way I look at life is like life is just a road full of hurdles, right? And eventually, like you're jumping over one hurdle to just jump over another one. Mm-hmm. In life, you're just going to keep jumping over hurdles. But essentially, like when you're jumping over those hurdles, you're learning how to jump over the next one. So you know, okay, when I'm getting to this next hurdle, if I pick my left leg up a little sooner, it's going to be easier. Or if I jump with both feet, it's going to be easier. And that's the way that I kind of view things very early on. But I also understand like not everyone is Jessica and I, right? Mm-hmm. Like not everyone is very proactive individually. And some people you actually need to have to show them what is possible so that they can, you know, accelerate themselves. And so I think with that sense, you know, that's where not just, you know, giving people mentorships works, because mentorship is important, but I also think access and opportunities is also important, right? So like you'll have people that are very creative, very entrepreneurial, but if they're not sometimes put in the right rooms or the right platforms to execute on that creativity, it might not go somewhere. So I think, mm-hmm. you know, sometimes it's also very important that you have to understand like everyone's different, right? Like that's what makes us human, right? So mm-hmm. in the sense that some people are going to be those people like a Jessica and me that can get on Google and figure it out and hack things and like, hey, I'm going to figure it out myself and strategize around and make the right connections I need to make in order to move myself out of whatever environment that I'm in currently. But then there's going to be certain other people you have to show like, hey, here's the platform. Let me show you how to use it. You know, this is what you have to do to make this lever work. And I'm using this as an example. And then eventually they get the hang of the system. And then they know how to use the system accurately so that they can progress themselves. So I think those are like, I touched on a few things there, but I think it's important to understand that like everyone has the ability to move forward out of whatever challenge that's in front of them. But sometimes certain people need to be given certain methods in order to do that, whether that's the Google access for me and Jessica to figure it out ourselves mm-hmm. or showing people how to figure it out. And once they get the hang of it, they'll know how to moving forward.
Which is a great answer, both of you, which is a perfect segue into New York on Tech, because I think that is a great living example of not only mentoring people, not only giving them access and opportunities, but putting it all together and creating something that is really changing the culture right now in New York City, and I guarantee in 10 years the world. So with that being said, how did New York and Tech come about?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, Evin and I, a little backstory, we met in 2009 and we had completed a summer leadership program with Ernst & Young. And when I saw him at the conference, I was like, man, this guy looks familiar. And so finally, when we got a chance to connect, we realized that we both went to Syracuse University. And then after the conference, we jumped on the A train that was Brooklyn bound. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened that when I was about to say bye to him, he was getting off at the same stop. So he actually grew up about like 5 blocks away from my entire life. But I didn't really, we didn't really meet each other until, you know, we were at that room in Ernst & Young, and we didn't meet each other until college. And so from then on, because of the fact that, like, you know, we kind of grew up in similar communities and we saw a lot of kind of the same things, there was an instant connection, and he truly has become my best friend. And I think that when I started working in technology and Evin started working in technology, we realized that there was a huge disproportionate gap between what we were able to access versus what communities that we're from and that are in New York City are able to access. We started asking ourselves, well, like, how did I get here? And then that question became, well, then how do I get other people here? And when we got to that question of how do I get other people here, Evin and I met at a local Starbucks in Syracuse, New York. And we started just like writing down really cool ideas about, you know, how do we actually get other people here? And there were 4 themes that really came about. And that really governs what it is that we do with New York on Tech. And we felt the 4 things that really get people into tech and really get people into industry and just opportunities in general is development, having the actual skills to be successful in the field, mentoring, having the appropriate career champions to really help you propel your career forward, and mentors, network, having the right relationships of people who are willing to open doors of opportunity for you, and then access, having the professional experiences that make you competitive and not just someone who says, oh, I'm interested in tech, but you have no kind of way to show that interest or show that someone has validated that interest through like an enrichment program or a summer internship experience at a big global company. And so that was how, the creation of New York on Tech came about. And, a little bit of history. We weren't New York on Tech at first. We were actually Brooklyn on Tech. And Brooklyn on Tech, there were actually schools in the Bronx and schools in Queens and schools in Missouri and schools all over the country, kind of like just reaching out, trying to figure out if there were resources like ours in their local communities. And I think once we started seeing that kind of interest, we realized that the problem that we were trying to solve was really big. And we said, well, with there being about 1 million students here locally in New York City, just in the public school system, we can really change the landscape of what opportunities look like here in the city. And think about, what it would look like as America on Tech 5 to 10 years from now.
And Evin, can you speak to the timeline of all these events to paint another picture of how it kind of transpired from idea to the Brooklyn on Tech to then now New York on Tech?
Cool. I don't want to damage the timeline, but picking up with where Jessica kind of started, essentially, I was still finishing up my master's program. Jessica had already started her career at one of the consulting firms that she was working for. And she had came up to Syracuse. We were meeting in the cafe, and essentially we're just trying to think through, like, how do we make an impact and what was important and what do we think needed to be put in place to essentially do that. And then that's kind of how we came up with the 4 pillars for New York on Tech. For Brooklyn on Tech originally. And then what we initially started doing was just like, once we designed that idea, the next few months was a lot of just like research, right? So like before you go into the market, like really just understanding what are the organizations out there, how are they doing, what are they doing, how are they doing it, like how are they reaching students, how are they impacting students, what partnerships do they have? And you really want to understand the ecosystem before existing anything. So before we even launched Brooklyn on Tech, after we had that idea phase, which was all on a pile of napkins, we then did the market research, right? So really understand like who were the stakeholders out there. And then we would start to go meeting with people like, so how did you create a nonprofit? And we spent hours, and I won't lie to you when I say this, like we spent hours in the library, just really taking out every book there was on like how to start a nonprofit. And one thing I quickly realized was that the books gave you very high level information, and the way that we were going to have to learn how to start a nonprofit was basically just like to do it ourselves and figure it out. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of the success that we had with building a nonprofit came from, I would say, twofold, which was like us figuring out on our own and us like just meeting with people that were willing to like share information with us. So to take it back to that timeline, after we did that market research and kind of seeing that there was a market opportunity for us, we then launched to become Brooklyn on Tech. We started with 2 partnering schools in Brooklyn. We did fairly well with them. That then scaled to 9 schools.
What year?
That was 2014.
Yeah, we started with 2 schools in 2014.
2014.
That's only a couple years ago. That's wild. Okay, cool.
Then we scaled from, then we went to 26 high schools. And now next year we'll probably we went to 36, right?
No. So 2014, we had 2 schools. And then 2015 for our second class, we had 9 schools. And now we work with 26 schools.
And then next year, right now, we'll probably have about 50 high schools from the partnerships that we're closing with the schools. So it's been a lot. And sometimes I've realized that like when you're building something, like you just said, fairly recent, but like when you're building something, it felt like 100 years ago. Because you're so invested into it and putting a lot of time into what you're doing.
Man, that is crazy. 2014 to 2017, going from 2 schools to 9 schools to this year 26 schools to 50 schools. So there's a lot of ways or questions that I could ask for our viewing audience, because we always have a wide range. Some people that are early on in entrepreneurship career, some people that are thinking about it, some people that just like to hear stories. But I do want to ask, and I know there's a lot of challenges on the way, but starting out, what were some of the biggest challenges that y'all faced, and how did you tackle them?
Yeah, I'll jump right into that. I think you have to don't seek external validation, right? And I'll say that again. Don't seek external validation. Like I remember when we were first building the website for Brooklyn on Tech, and me and Jessica were really hyped. It was like, oh man, this is going to be great. We're going to put it out on Facebook. Everybody going to go crazy and likes and shares. And like, we launched and it was nothing. It was, it was pretty quiet. You got a couple of friends that say, oh, that's great. Right. And, and
pretty
so
quiet.
Right. So what I say that to say is like, when you're building something, it's a long path you have to go down. Right. And if you're building it for the wrong reasons, you're going to realize that very soon. So I think whatever you're doing, whatever idea you have, make sure it's something that you truly believe in. And then that when everyone else doesn't see the value in it up front, or when everyone else isn't like cheering for you on the sideline up front, that you still have the internal motivation and the willpower to keep pushing yourself forward. So I think that's very important, especially in the beginning stages, before, any legal formations, before any, closing of a deal, before, anything, that you internally are invested into what you're about to build.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I definitely agree. And I think for me, like, like we were doing New York on Tech while we were still working at one point. And so for me, it was all about like vision and execution and having a very clear strategy. Because I think when we started, I had a 9 to 9, and then I had like a 10 to 2 in the morning. And my 10 to 2 in the morning was always Brooklyn on Tech and New York on Tech now. But we were working full time. New York on Tech was a pure passion project that we did market research on, that we were trying to find how we add value to tech education. And we never thought that it would be something, that we would take full time. It was literally us just trying to provide people opportunity. And then we got accepted into a fellowship program that gave, a pretty decent seed grant. And I was like, I think the problem we're trying to solve is pretty big. So I'm going to take this full time. And at that point I had already, had work experience. And I told myself, like, if this doesn't work out, then that I'm not going to be any less employable next year. I still have the same skills that I did, last year. And so I think understanding that your passions are going to lead to your vision, and it's going to lead to the world, conspiring to support you. And I think those 10 to 2s that we pulled to be in the office at 8 a.m. the next morning on only 5 hours of sleep, they were totally worth it. And going back to what Evin was saying about, having a clear, having a clear understanding that something that you're building takes a long time. I think people, usually say it takes about 6 years to become an overnight success. And it's truly, it's truly true. Never did we think that 2 years ago when we started this, we would be where we're at now. But there has been a process in place, and it hasn't been, all easy. There was a lot of learning curves. There were things that, that we learned, things that we're still learning. And, you just have to be resilient, and you have to have grit, and you have to, be, unapologetic about what it is your vision is, and really having a plan to execute it, and not really looking for external validation to say like, yes, the work that you're doing is good work.
Man, that's phenomenal. And if you had to say, how did you get your first few schools to buy in before you showcased that you've added any value or anything like that? It's like, what do those conversations look like, or the framework? Because there might be people on this line where they have this great idea, but they're struggling, or they're pacing around on how to get people to buy in, their first couple customers, their first couple clients or whatnot. So what mentality did y'all have before y'all had a history of success or anything like that to get your first few schools on board to what y'all were making?
Yeah, I think just like with any entrepreneur, like your first couple sales, or people that truly believe in you are going to be people that you're personally connected to already, right? So whether that be a family member, a friend, a colleague. So in the example of New York on Tech, the first two schools that we secured came through like personal contacts that we had who were teachers at those schools, right? So essentially we knew some teachers, we reached out, a few got back to us, we had a few meetings with schools, and then we successfully closed those two schools after a series of meetings with like the teachers. Then after you meet with the teachers, you get like a guidance counselor or like some dean, and then after you meet with the dean, eventually work your way up where you're now either meeting with the principal or the person that actually had like, the power to sign off on the partnership. And so essentially that's what happened with us. We leveraged our personal contacts to get into those two first schools, but you have to come prepared, right? So, I mean, like, don't think just because you have a personal end, that's automatically going to secure the win.
Right.
No, we came with the PowerPoint decks, we had it printed out. We had the PowerPoint on a flash drive just in case the person wanted a presentation. Like we practiced the night before, probably a few days before, like really just understanding what we were going to say. Because I think, I won't go too deep into this in case this is something you want to ask later, but as an entrepreneur, like you have to understand the market that you're talking to. Like when you're building a product or a service, the what you value from your product or service will not be the same thing that the customer values from the product or service. Or what the customer, you know what I mean? So like really understanding like the passion that Jessica and I have for New York on Tech may be the same passion that the school had, but the school may see it as another benefit, right? So like really understanding that kind of the outcomes and what was all attached to what we were doing, and making sure that you speak directly to the person that you're speaking to. Because when you're speaking to a teacher and the things that you're talking about with the teacher is going to be a little different than the things that you're talking about with the principal. And like when we're talking to each other, the things that we're talking about are a little different. So like really understanding your audience. So I think that's also important. So personal contacts, leverage them, but it comes down to you being on your A game in regards to being able to secure those first kind of contracts and partnerships.
Yeah. And to add to that too, if you do a really good job, then people refer you. So, most of the schools that we work with have been from straight referral of everyone being really excited about the program and then wanting to vouch for us to provide these services to students in other schools. And so always, like, I would say, under promise, over deliver. Clients will tell clients that tell clients, and essentially you start building a brand like that. And I think after your first year, you do have data to show, how good your students are doing. And if you show that like you actually did a good job with the program, then people are willing to vouch for you and your work.
Got you. And then did y'all both leave your full-time jobs at the same time, or did you leave first, Jess?
I left first. I left first. I left in 2015, and that's when we got the seed funding. And then Evin left in 2016, in the beginning of 2016.
Okay, and then y'all charge? Was it a free service just to get started? Like, I mean, y'all don't have to know numbers and whatnot, but I just wanted to try to get that frame.
Yeah, so the first year was like a pilot, and I think that's also important too. So the first year was a pilot. Then after you do well with them, you can convert them into customers, and then everyone moving forward is a customer.
Okay, I got you. 110 on that. Okay, 110 on that. And before we move into our present day, do we start to talk about what a typical day look like and managing teams and entrepreneurship advice for all our hustlers out there? This is on. I did want to ask, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself when y'all two were in that library writing on napkins, think about this idea, what would you tell yourselves if you can go back in time and be like, yo, let me give you a little bit of advice before you even starting the journey, knowing what y'all know now, what would y'all tell yourselves back in the library?
Two things come to mind, and then I'll probably have some other things to say after Jessica gives her insight. I think one big thing to understand is the importance of leveraging existing infrastructure, right? So a lot of the times when you come to market with your products, like the first thing people are going to say is like, what makes you different? Or why is your program better than the other person? And you need to know your competitive advantage and like what are your differentiators that make you stand out. But also sometimes scale back and say, okay, this is the idea I have. Who else is doing this in my market? And can I influence their already existing infrastructure, right? Because sometimes when you look at already existing infrastructures, that can save you a lot of capital that goes into building that infrastructure. It saves you a lot of hours in regards to like figuring things out because it's already built out. And all you're coming in to do is essentially enhance that infrastructure. So I think it would be understand that existing infrastructure. I forgot my second one, so give me a second.
I mean, for me, I would say like Nike's just do it. I mean, I think like a lot of people get stuck in analysis paralysis. And that wasn't like when we were in the library, it's because we didn't know, what was the first step. And I think at one point we were just like, we just have to do it. So I think if I could go back, I wouldn't have spent the 10 hours in the library. I probably spent like 2 hours in the library. Because you literally can spend your entire year just researching, but you will not know what is required of you unless you actually go out there and do it. And I think that there's not enough people saying just do it. I think like, the conversation is always like, oh, it has to be intentional. And yeah, it does have to be intentional, but intentionality also comes with experience too. And you can't know what you don't know unless you're put in a situation where you have to learn it. And so if I could go back then, I would have spent 2 hours in the library and then 8 hours actually executing as opposed to 10 hours actually researching that day. Because I think after the 100th book, it got to a point where it was like, all right, well, I feel like I wasted my time. So don't get caught in analysis paralysis. Just, be ready and be ready to just be resilient with anything that comes your way and be willing to learn.
Yeah. The other one that I have forgotten initially was like always design with a customer in mind, right? So I think, like sometimes people can have really cool ideas and not sometimes, think of the customer or if this is something that the customer is going to want. Like Jessica kind of lowered it, but we stayed in that library way more than 10 hours.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, like when we first started New York on Tech, like Jessica was saying earlier, it was purely out of passion. We weren't thinking about, how do you actually turn this into a business? But essentially, because I think, and I won't just say this, but like coming from corporate backgrounds, like having us understanding of technology, but then also like the financial side, like I studied economics as an undergrad, did a ton of, financial, finance work. And then Jessica studied accounting undergrad, did a bunch of accounting like work. We understood like both sides of the business, like the tech side and then also the business side. So right off the bat, once we realized like, hey, this could be more than a passion and we could actually turn this into a business that could potentially be scalable, we were able to kind of like, scope out a customer and then test it and see if this was a service that a customer would be willing to pay for. To kind of lower that down for the everyday entrepreneur, I think is important to do that same thing. It's like, yes, have your product or your service that you're passionate about, but also try to get out there in the market. Like Jessica said, just do it and see if you can actually attract a customer, because the big thing that you're going to need to make yourself sustainable is you're going to need that customer that can help you, bring in the cash flow so that you can grow your organization. So I think that's one of the big things is like, think about leveraging existing infrastructure so that sometimes the process isn't so hard up front and you can learn with other people that have been in the space and eventually you're helping them innovate and improve their structures. But sometimes that's on a case-by-case scenario. So I have to put that out there. That's not always going to be the case with everything. And then 2, design with a customer in mind, but make sure that your customer is willing to pay for the product or service that you're offering. Because sometimes what might happen is you're designing something, but you realize after you speak with the customers and you get some, insight from your target markets that you may take a pivot because you design one service, but you realize that they're willing to pay for the other side, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to use it in general terms here, but like understanding those things I think is very key, essentially, when you're first starting off.
Yeah, amen. And to transition to the present day, I think a fair question would be, and I think you were alluding to it earlier, but I think y'all can give some good insight. What changed in your mind, or what do you believe businesses have to change when your model that you created as a passion product changes into having to create have a more business model mindset? Because I think that is where a lot of social entrepreneurs, people that have hearts of gold, and they start these things as passion projects, and then they turn into nonprofits. And I think that's one area where they miss out on, is flipping the switch. Or do y'all believe from y'all experience a switch needs to be flipped to start thinking more business like? Because if you always think, oh, this is a project at the heart, then a lot of times you start to end up coming short on the cash flow because you're not attacking it maybe in a more business mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there are a lot of amazing projects, right, going on in communities all across America. But I don't think all of the projects have to become businesses, honestly, because I think that there are a lot of nonprofits, trying to solve really big societal issues in our country. And sometimes, it's actually partnering with somebody else that's already doing the work and seeing how you can be helpful. Or if your goals, literally, sometimes your goals is just to do 1 or 2 day workshops, right? Maybe you don't want to have whole programs that you're trying to monetize. I really think it really depends on who the creator is and what their goals are, because sometimes, like, not every passion project is something that needs to be monetized. I think for me, I wanted to do New York on Tech full time. It was something that I saw myself dedicating my life to. And so because I decided that I wanted to dedicate my life to it, then yeah, I did need to be flexible in terms of thinking about how we were going to bring in cash flow, because I couldn't just be a passionate entrepreneur, but then like not be able to like pay my bills, right? And I think that like not all passion projects need to be monetized. I don't think that every community initiative has to be monetized. I don't think that every passion project needs to turn into a nonprofit or a social enterprise. I think that it really depends on the creator's goals and how far they are willing to take those goals. And because I think we wanted to take New York on Tech really far, it did require for us to put on our business savvy hats and think about how do we develop a business model based on the organization that we are building, so that we're able to have longevity, as opposed to something that dies down because we didn't bring in any cash.
I think Jessica gave a lot of good insight there. What I will also add, so one, I think it does fall a lot onto the actual creator of the product or service. Is yes, at one point in the game, if you realize this is something that could potentially be a business, you have to turn on that business switch. But I think this also segues into like the importance of building a team, right?
Go ahead, open up.
In the sense, it's like not everyone is going to be the business person, right? Like sometimes you are that like the person with the heart of gold, like really care about, the impact, and you need that team member who also cares about the impact and has a heart of gold as well, right? Let's keep that straight. You want everyone to be kind of on the same path with that, but you also need that partner that has more of the business sense, or if doesn't have the business sense, is more willing to, be on that business side and learn the skills needed. So you're going to need that person that's going to be thinking about the financial models and the growth plan and the scalability and the partnerships that are going to be needed in order for you to grow out the business. So I think, yes, at a certain point, you got to turn on the business hat. Maybe it doesn't need to be you per se, but you need to build a team around you so that you can make the appropriate business decisions for the organization. But also hitting back on what Jessica said is like also understanding that not everything needs to be a business. and that some things can be more of a passion project or just a way for you to impact the community as a whole. So I think, you got to actually think through all of that and kind of see, like, because this is on a case by case scenario, right?
Mm-hmm,
like,
yep.
So you got to understand who you are, and then where what we're saying kind of fits for you.
Amen, amen. And then I know you spoken that T word, and I want y'all to kind of open up on that, because I know through 3 years and how the growth that y'all have had, I know it just hasn't been y'all. So can y'all speak on who else has been played a pivotal role, as well as how y'all have grown at working on and developing a true team to kind of manifest this dream that y'all had with Brooklyn on Tech, which started as Brooklyn on Tech and now is New York on Tech?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things up front is that I get to work with my best friend Jessica. I think that sets a big foundation for the growth that we've had, because to tell you the truth, like, business is a very emotional roller coaster, right? And so, sometimes attitudes conflict with each other or different opinions on things. But essentially, you have to have a good relationship with someone in order for you to do good business. So I think because me and Jessica have been friends for a long period of time before we went into business with each other, that helped a lot in regards to how we team together and how we understand each other as individuals as well as like business professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important to say. Also, we've had a lot of help in the sense that, like, we have an amazing board of directors, we have an amazing board of advisors, we have an amazing group of mentors. We had up front, when we first kind of started, we had some people that we hired like part-time to do certain things. And then eventually we started to hire full-time staff to work with New York on Tech. So, that's kind of been high level kind of understanding of like the head count of people that have kind of helped us, everything from like us being like a 2-person team and like supporting each other to like the board of directors, board of advisors, the mentors, the part-time employees, and then to now like the full-time staff.
Yeah. No, I would have to say the same thing. I think like when we were first starting out, it was just me and Evin with a vision. And then like once we realized that we couldn't do it alone, that's when we started employing the expertise of people that could help us along the way. And so, we get people to teach our classes. We get people to mentor the students. We get our board of directors to open up their company doors. We're able to think about what it is that we need for an organization, and we do like an annual planning session where we really identify like all of the resources that we're going to need in terms of full-time staff, in terms of part-time staff, board members, board of advisors, and then start planning from there. It started as 2, and now we have like, I would say there's mad people involved.
Mad people? Like what? How many? As far as like team.
So we have our 7-person board of directors. I have a 7-person board of advisors. We have 4 people on staff outside of me and Evin, and we have a 6-person mentor council. We have about like 60 volunteers. We have like 12 instructors, and so it's a big team.
Yeah, that's huge. And quickly, could you share how y'all been able to get such volunteer support? Because I looked online and y'all last year, I might misquote, but had well over 10,000 hours of volunteer time of instruction and whatnot. And that's huge for a company that's only been around a couple years to have other people that are very, very committed, not only to helping y'all, but to helping the students that you serve. So could you say what is a critical component from getting that type of support from people that are not getting paid?
Yeah. So one, I want to throw like extra realness into this part right here.
Please do.
Like, yes, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of, volunteer hours. Essentially to kind of go back to what I was saying before, like, a lot of that came from like our friends at first, right? It was like, you reach out to your buddies and your homegirls that are working in the tech industry, and you kind of say like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I would love for you to get involved if you have the time. And then a few of them agree, right? To be honest with you. Some will be busy. And then they come out, they have a good time, and then eventually they recommend friends, right? And their friends recommend friends. And then like you start to get attention on like articles, and you get media buzz, and you get a social media following. So like more people start to find out about you. So that's kind of how we've been able to grow from a volunteer perspective in regards to like the mentors and everything like that. But I think it's also important to be like, when you have those people volunteering their time, like the most important thing to people when you realize it as you get older is time, right? Like your paycheck can go up, like you can get cool things, but like what really matters is time. So like when people come to New York on Tech, we try to like make them have a great time. Like we try to facilitate, networking opportunities so that they're not just, paying it for our kids, but in a sense, they're also getting a win out of it where they can network with other professionals and things like that. And I can go into more depth with it, but I'm trying to show you like it has to be a win-win. And the way that I said I want to keep it real here is that like I have to show a lot of respect and love for the initial mentors that we had as Brooklyn on Tech, because like while now we have a lovely office space like in the financial district, and we partner with like leading organizations to host our students. Like in the beginning, like Jessica and I would literally like sometimes having our students meet us at the mall or like public areas, right? And that had a lot to do with like being scrappy up front, but that allowed us to essentially like see and get the support that we needed, right? Because we went above and beyond the amount of hours that we wanted to do with our students. Like we really enjoyed like teaching them about technology, and that was very in the beginning. But essentially, like once we showed them that we can teach them about technology and that we had a business, then we were able to scale it to something that was really cool and big. But so that's why I'm always supportive of those initial people that volunteer their time, and a lot of those people that came with us in the beginning when we were utilizing like free space are still with us today, and a lot of friends are with us. So I try to paint you that picture in the beginning of like, when you think about the entrepreneurial story of like people starting out in their garage or something like that. And like garage, you're next to the heaters and your mom's and dad's tools and things like that. And then eventually like that garage environment becomes an office. So I try to say that like those people that are with you from the beginning, like you always have to show like extra crazy appreciation because part of their time is what helped you grow as an organization as well.
Yeah. I will also say regarding Evan's thing about time, like I think, you need to be organized and be very clear about what your volunteer expectations are, as opposed to just coming into an organization and not knowing what you're really committing to. Like a lot of I participated in many nonprofits before, and I would like be a volunteer, but like I never knew what I was getting into, and sometimes it was like super outrageous commitments that were never communicated in the beginning. And so had I known what I was getting into, I would have been a productive member of that group, But I think one thing that we try to emphasize here is giving volunteers very reasonable expectations, being very respectful of their time and their schedules, but by providing dates up front, giving them access to all communications up front, onboarding them to things like Slack and Google Groups, and just making it very easy for them to participate, as opposed to, having them come and actually build, your organization for you.
Yeah.
You want them to, you want them to be involved. You don't want them to like feel like, they're your employees.
Yeah. No, y'all hit up some great points. And before, cause I know I wanted to do, I want to ask one question before we move on. Question as far as, because I know we haven't talked about the students that y'all do serve on this show a lot, and we don't have a lot of time to go in depth, but I did want to address or have y'all address what do y'all believe the biggest hurdle that the students that y'all face as far as career wise or just in general, and then how does New York on Tech solve or what kind of results have y'all seen, how y'all been able to solve that biggest hurdle for the students that y'all do serve?
Yeah. I mean, I think I said this a little bit earlier. I truly believe that the problem is opportunity. It's not talent. I think talent is everywhere and opportunity is very scarce. And sometimes opportunities don't fall in the laps of students who really, really, really are deserving. simply because of lack of access to information and a lack of access to relationships. And so I can give you many use cases about students in the New York on Tech program who have graduated, but I'll focus on a few. First, there was a student named Jeremy. He was an amazing kid. He was a senior when he came to New York on Tech, and he had been learning how to code by himself for a very long time. And when we interviewed him, that was something that he was very clear about, where he was like, my knowledge has taken me but so far. There's no online resource that can take me right now to help me learn very in-demand industry things and industry tools. And so when he came to New York on Tech, he was super ambitious and he was so excited to be a part of the program. And I think he fully took advantage of every single aspect of it. He had a great relationship with his mentor, Rob. Rob opened up opportunities for Jeremy at companies he was connected to. And then ultimately, after Jeremy graduated from our program, he went and did a paid internship over the summer with Warby Parker's engineering department, where he was getting paid very, very well and compensated for the skills that he was able to acquire throughout our program. And now he's, in the middle of his freshman year at a college in the United States, and he's doing amazing things in computer science. And then we also had a student named Raven, similar story, grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, attended high school in Brownsville, Brooklyn, came to New York on Tech because her school had no computer science or computer engineering program, but she had an interest in it because she was learning it by herself. She came and we accelerated her. And then ultimately last summer, she did the Google Computer Science Summer Institute. And so I think for us, we know that opportunities are what stops students from getting into industries. And those opportunities can't come through them unless they have the right relationships. And so we see ourselves as an accelerator and an incubator for really amazing kids and really amazing teens who have this passion for technology, but have no way to kind of demystify what the space actually looks like and give them the real industry tools that are going to make them competitive for these kinds of 21st century opportunities.
Nah, I think you put a nail in a coffin on that, and I think you spoke very eloquently on that. So thank you. And before we enter the future round, I did want to ask a couple quick questions for all those out there for 3 years, and this would be rapid fire. For those people that have ideas about a nonprofit, but they really don't have limited amount of funds and their connections aren't really that diverse, to say if they don't have a master's degree or they're not in any networks, what would be the best piece of advice you would give those?
I would say definitely look into joining like accelerator programs or incubators, particularly around the industry that you're interested in. So like there's a lot of kind of like social impact and nonprofit and education fellowships and accelerators that people can apply to online. And it's as easy as probably like just Googling like, nonprofit fellowship or like nonprofit accelerator and seeing what comes up. And I think, through there, you'll start to be able to broaden your network, get access to some capital, but most importantly, be able to get thought leadership around like how to create the business model and the growth strategy for the idea that you have.
Mm-hmm. And I always say, use things like LinkedIn and Twitter. Don't be afraid to, if you don't have a relationship, don't be afraid to forge it. The amazing thing about social media and these platforms is that they give you access to all kinds of people that can help answer your question. You just have to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm. Nah, great. And also, this is just on the top of my head. If you were like to lead the Department of Education and one of your roles was to implement programming for minorities within the school, the education system, what angle would y'all take on improving those relations and improving the outcome?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, I would really like to see more industry aligned curriculum and experiences. I think that, when I reflect on what work life looked like for me, and then I reflect on what education looked like for me, those two experiences were very disconnected. Very few of what I learned in college and in grad school is actually what I applied when I was on the job. And I think that the way that we really prepare students for careers and prepare students for opportunities of the future is by giving them those things really early on. And so I would like to see more alignment for students when it comes to, what jobs and careers and industry looks like for them while they're still in school. So I don't know if I would implement more work-based learning programs. I don't know if I would, allocate 1 day a week to make sure all students are doing an internship and it's a requirement for graduation. But those are some, the high-level things I think needs to happen. Like students need to have more industry-aligned knowledge, information, and experiences before, they graduate from college, so that when they do graduate from college, they're actually prepared for the opportunities that come their way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Jessica said a great note there. I think it'll just be like the more importance on like technology education as well. Like, luckily, there's been a lot of big push in New York City, particularly around like, the importance of technology education. I think it's important to understand that like in the time that we're in now, like technology is as important as like reading, writing, and math. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter like what industry you go into, like it's either powered by technology or supported by technology. And essentially you need to understand how technology works, whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee. So I think, but then that aligns to what Jessica says about like the industry tools and methodologies and practices. So I think it's like, continue to push tech education. Because I'm a big believer that like technology is the great equalizer, because it offers you the opportunity to like access information and to like really create your own businesses and to, a whole slew of things. So I'm very pro advocate for tech education in the school system.
Yeah. No, that's great. Both great answers. And in our future round, I just have 2 questions for our future round. What's next for New York on Tech in 2017? What can everybody be expecting in 2017 to see from New York on Tech that you can disclose now?
For 2017, could just continue to do good work, right? I think, like when people say New York on Tech, I just want them to say, yeah, they're doing really good work, right? And like as simple as that, like if people can say that, like I'm happy. So in 2017, continue to work our way up, work with amazing kids like we have been already, work with amazing volunteers, amazing companies, continue to hire top talent, and people that are really dedicated to the mission and vision that we're trying to push. But most importantly, as we continue to grow as an organization, that anytime someone hears the word New York on Tech or mentions us in a sentence, they say they do amazing work, because that's what we came here to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if I could add to that too, I think for us, part of having people saying they're doing amazing work is storytelling. And so for us, we're in the process right now of collecting testimonials and collecting stories of our students and their experiences in technology or in their communities, or how they're leveraging technology to solve their problems, in order to share that via the World Wide Web. Because oftentimes, I feel like there's not a scarcity anymore in terms of like finding advice for young professionals and individuals, who are our age. But I find that like sometimes the voices of people who are younger than us, who are in high school, who are in college, who are in middle school, they often get silenced. And I'm always about like, well, what about the kids? So I'd like to, I think part of saying they do good work is really amplifying their stories and making sure that we're putting that in, in the World Wide Web, so that the world can see that we're here and, we're here to stay.
That's a perfect reflection right there. Cause I think about it all the time. I think now we live in a society where if you're a young adult, there's so much access to information, programs, and information about opportunities. But then you think of high schoolers and middle schoolers, oftentimes, in the household, 9 times out of 10, you're not getting heard from your parents. And then it's a lot of peer-to-peer relationships, but sometimes those peer-to-peer, they might not have the access or the knowledge or whatnot. And those that do, aren't usually the main people that are talking and sharing information. So if you can get it from a peer, or you can have it from their perspective, that can have a huge impact and really create the generational shift once peers start advocating for changes in technology, change in education and reform and all that, rather than people that are older or considered authority figures. So y'all, you hit that on the head. And last question of the future round: when it's all said and done, personally, how do y'all want to be remembered?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I've said this so many times. It's like when I am, an old woman who is in, I don't know when I'll die, honestly, but I just want to
Please
be
don't
able
go
to
there.
say, I want to be able to say, at the time of my passing, that at that point I did every single thing that I wanted to do and that I had no regrets, regardless of what I wanted to do and the outcomes of what that was. I want to be able to say that, like, at least I tried. And so, literally, it's just passing away with my legacy being like, hey, Jessica was the type of person who had an idea, went for the idea, and regardless of whether or not the idea was succeeded or the idea failed, she at least tried.
Yeah, I think Jessica said kind of the same thing that I have in mind. I think just like when I'm old and I'm in my mind thinking about life, like I just feel um, good with the life that I've lived, from everything from a personal perspective, like family to friends, relationships to having to be like a good father to my future kids, to just being a great business professional as well, and just being remembered as someone that wasn't afraid to like chase his dreams. And yeah, I think that if I could have that type of life where I just like wasn't afraid to chase the dream, if the dream came true or I learned from the process of trying to build it, to just being a great, man in general and like a family man and a friend, that would be the ideal situation for me.
Nah, man, I love those. I love those answers, man. And before we enter our coach change round, which is the last round, rapid fire, rapid question, this thought did bump into my mind. I know as we enter 2017, and first of all, congratulations. I know I mentioned the intro, but congratulations on the Forbes 30 under 30 and starting to get. And I know y'all been recognized by a lot of platforms, but really starting to dial in and get acclaim for the great work y'all been doing the last 3 years, which preceded by the hard work that y'all did the last decade. So congratulations on that.
Thank
You.
you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And but also, how do y'all plan on, or how do y'all deal with those or as y'all grow? I know y'all have a lot of opportunity to, everybody's reaching out for questions on nonprofit, everybody's reaching out to inquiries on New York Tech, and then you still have to do the work, but then you also planning for the future. So how are you going forward? How are you going to plan with when now there's a lot more access to communication to y'all have to plan, there's a lot of moving pieces within your organization. So going forward though, how do y'all balance everything?
That's a great question. Greg, I've learned how to say no. Um, Honestly, I think that, like, I think it, it's too, it's unrealistic and it's not physically, like capacity wise, it's not possible to reach every single person who wants to reach you. I don't like being totally inaccessible, so I am the type of person who I will respond to every email. It might not be within the first like 5 minutes, but I will respond to every email. And depending on the email, and depending on the person, and depending of the nature of the connection, um, I I either offer people, an opportunity to ask me the questions via email, and I'll respond that way. Or I'll refer to people to certain blog posts that I've written. Or depending if it's a personal connection with someone who actually has been introduced to me by someone that I really value and whose relationship I really value, then I actually will take, a coffee meeting or a lunch date. But I think, as entrepreneurs, our time is very scarce. And I feel like, if you don't incorporate self-care and work-life balance strategies, then your business is going to start feeling like real hard work, as opposed to you actually trying to build something that you care about because you're passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. And so I've learned, a few techniques, of which means like you're either going to send me all your questions via email and I'm going to respond electronically, or you can set up a coffee date, or I'll refer you to things that I've already written that may be able to help. And I I really don't like saying no, but I think for my sanity, for me to be realistic about myself and the kinds of things that I need to be a fully functional human being, saying no has been a great lesson learned in 2016 that I'm going to be carrying with me in 2017.
I think, as always, Jessica said some great insight there. So I definitely have incorporated saying no to certain things. But also when I say no, I try to connect the person that I'm saying no to other people that may be helpful, as like speakers or advice, people that they can connect with, whatever the opportunity that I'm saying no to. So whenever I say no, it's very intentional and thought out of why I'm saying no, but I also try to think about how I can connect that person to an additional resource. I think one of the big things for me too is like trying to write more, so that I can get a lot of the lessons that I've learned out there to people. And when people are asking me questions, because to be honest with you, like a lot of times when people reach out to you, a lot of people have similar questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking about those questions, writing about that, and referring them to people to read first, and saying like, hey, if you have additional questions, let me know. And I think it's about scheduling your time. I was meeting with a buddy today actually for lunch, and we were talking about how like when you're younger, when you're like in college, your freshman year of college, your sophomore year, and you reach out to professionals, sometimes like you will write them really long emails and they get back to you with like 1 or 2 words or 1 sentence. And you take that personal, like, yo, I just wrote you a whole email. Like, why are you only replying back to me in a few words? Or like you ask to meet with somebody and they want to meet with you like 2 months out. I think when I was in college as an undergrad, I took that kind of like personal.
Mm-hmm.
Now as a professional, I understand what was going on sometimes, not in all cases, but in most cases, like people are busy, right? And they're trying to figure out how to be most effective with their time. So with that said, like I always make the time for someone, but I let them know up front also like why I can't do it right now. So I think it's very important about like how do you communicate. So if someone reaches out to me and I know right now all my attention needs to be focused on fundraising, or all my attention needs to be focused on like closing business contracts, I'll say, I can't meet right now. Let me know your questions, but maybe we can meet next month. However, if it's urgent, let me know and I'll try my best to figure out a time to meet now. So I think it's also about being transparent with people also. So yeah, man.
Nah, that's
That would be big things on my end.
Now, y'all dropping some very, very technical and very great advice for our listeners. And I really appreciate y'all not just pontificating about stories, but also giving a lot of actionable stuff that whatever business or whatever industry, career path you're on, they could take away. So that's a great segue into our last round, the culture change round, where I ask a series of rapid fire questions and hopefully receive a series of rapid fire answers. Y'all ready to start?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. What is the best piece of advice that you never received?
Hold on.
Yeah, because I had to change it up because I was like, man, I've been doing the same ones for like 38, 48 episodes. I was like, okay, let me change it up a little bit.
I like that. Give me 1 second.
That I never received. Wow.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm gonna have to use that, man. I like that one.
Well,
give me
you
a
know
second.
what?
Go ahead, Jessica.
I haven't. College will not determine your life success. And I think for me, do I have to? Oh,
Yeah, you
should
can.
I?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Go ahead. Go explain.
Okay. So yeah, so college is not going to determine your life success. The things you do after college and what you decide to commit to afterward in terms of what you want out of your professional career or what you want in terms of your civic engagement or what you want to do in terms of a business you want to start. I think that is what's going to determine your success. You really carving out the things that matter to you because a few years ago, my mom was like, nope, you're going to go to college and that's going to determine, your success. And then after that, you're just going to be successful. And I think I realized like, no, college was a road on my way to success. And I realized everything after college was things that I needed to adult on and really figure out what my values were and, go from there.
That's great.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that was good too. I think, and I don't want people to get confused about what I'm saying, but what I've learned about life is like life is a game. And I don't mean in the sense that like don't take it serious, but meaning like life is literally a series of learning lessons when you think about it. Like, when you're playing a video game and you fail on that first board or you fail that mission, the next time around you understand how to navigate that mission a little better. Like, oh, I can go to this room and find the hidden key. Like I need to watch out for the monster that's gonna come from here. Right? It's essentially like that's what I've learned about life is like it's a game, and essentially as you're going through each phase of your life, which is a new board on the video game, like you're learning a life lesson that's going to make you ready for the next one. And I don't think anyone ever kind of told me like, Evin, life's a game, because I think, just like I'm trying to say now, like people might think what I'm trying to say is don't take it serious. But what I'm actually trying to say is that you're learning as you move along. And that's the importance when you're playing a video game. Like you're learning how to beat a board so you can beat the next board. And I think that applies from everything from like the environments that you're navigating in corporate to school to your own business.
Mm-hmm. No, those are both great answers. And the next question, what is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is like living life with regret of not just, accomplishing or at least trying to accomplish everything that I wanted to do with my life. I think that would be my biggest fear.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like type of bugs crawling on me that I can't see. Like in the dark or something.
That is it. You just like, can't find it. You like, where is it at in my bed? Like, is it?
I mean, I think my biggest fear is directly tied to what I want my legacy to be. And I think it's going back to what Evin just said, like living my life with a lot of what ifs and not enough of I did. Or I will, or I have done. Yeah, that's my biggest fear.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Both of those. The fears are not great, but y'all got it. If there's one habit that you could add to your life, what would it be?
Audit yourself. I think one of the biggest things that I learned that I took with me from business is like I audit myself a lot. I think a lot of times we set goals for ourselves and then we don't look at those goals. So like, things that I'll do is like one of my big goals. These are one goals of many. Like I'll say, okay, I don't want to check social media a lot this year. Like I felt like I found myself going on social media a lot. So what I did was that every day I read my goals, but I also audit myself in the sense of saying, okay, today is Monday. How many times did I look at my social media? And if it's so many times that I can't remember how many times I looked on my social media accounts, then I know like I didn't stay true to that goal. But you don't realize that unless you audit yourself. So really holding yourself accountable to the benchmarks and the goals that you want to hit. So I think that's important to audit yourself, your life, your business, your relationships, and see how you can continue to improve.
Yeah, I think for me is sleep more. I think like, a lot of people do like hashtag team no sleep. And at one point I'm like, yeah, hashtag team no sleep. And I was just like, no, that kind of worked for me when I was in college. But now it's just like, I need to sleep more. And so I think going back to what Evin said about social media, I want to incorporate sleeping more as a habit. I've been on top of it since 2017, but it is early in the year, to be honest. So I'm not sure what my self-assessment is going to be at the end of the year. But that's definitely a daily habit I want to incorporate.
Oh, that's great. Those are two huge ones. And also, what is your top, I guess, 2 digital resources or websites that y'all use on an everyday basis?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I use LinkedIn every day and I use Facebook every day, but I don't use them. Like I use Facebook every day to kind of like make sure I'm not missing nobody's important birthday, right? Like, close friends or family members or people that have been significant in my life. And then I use LinkedIn to manage my business relationships. which has been very important for the growth of New York on tech as well as myself professionally. So from that perspective, I use those every day, but I also use Flipboard a lot, which I use still, which is on my phone to look at news. So I use Flipboard to constantly dig through news articles on certain industries that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I think I use way more than two. I think, and it also depends on what I'm, what kind of mood I am in today.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a really big fan of Marie Forleo. I think she's fantastic.
Oh man, she's freaking dope.
Yeah, so when I need some inspiration, it's marieforleo.com for Q&A Tuesdays. And then in terms of like, curation of content and like how I can get information really fast, I would say it's Twitter. Managing business relationships and just branding in general, I would say it's LinkedIn. But I also have Flipboard, and I have a few mobile apps like the New York Times that give me up-to-date, real-time articles on things that I care about. And so those are definitely some of the resources I use.
No, those are great answers. I'll make sure I include all those resources in the show notes. And then the last question, and I guess that will wrap up. Actually, no, because I think I asked a question similar to that early in the round. So I'll wrap up the culture change round. And the last question of the whole podcast, I call myself a culture change agent. And every person that I bring on this show is a culture change agent in their own right, in their own lane, in their own industry. So this question is, you can change one thing about society, most specifically the minority culture. What would it be and why?
Honestly, I don't think I would change anything about the culture. I think people of color in our country are creators, are innovators, are like contributing so much significance to our national economy. I think the problem is that oftentimes those stories are not the ones that are shared via very big media platforms. So I'm not sure that I would change anything about the culture. I think I would try and change mainstream culture to see more of the beauty and more of the contributions we make to our society that oftentimes go unnoticed. Got you, Evin.
To be honest with you, Jessica took the words out of my mouth. She just said it in a different way. I was essentially going to say that, I think, African Americans, blacks as a whole, Latinos, minorities as a whole, like when you think about society and a lot of the greatest advancements that we've had, like we're there and like we are a major part in that development. So I think as a culture, I wouldn't change anything because essentially we have continued to be change agents for many of years and continue to be innovators for many years. The only thing I was going to say was like the marketing behind it, right? And that kind of goes back to what Jessica was saying about mainstream culture in the sense that like we need for those contributions to continue to be pushed, whether it's by mainstream or it's by our own stream, right? So like when you see another person of minority descent like doing amazing things, like continue to share that, because when you share it, it reaches more people. And when it reaches more people, they share it and it reaches more people. So I think it's important to continue to push the accomplishments that we have as a community, because sometimes they're not always broadcasted on all of the major media outlets. But you do see people being highlighted for their work. So I won't say that people don't get highlighted. I would just say not all cases are highlighted. So I think it's important as a culture that we continue to support the success of each other and understand that we are doing amazing things. So that would be my kind of input there.
Nah, those are both great answers. And this, like I said in the beginning, this was a phenomenal, one of my best interviews in the whole session, specifically definitely in season 3. And I'm just glad I got on your schedule because I know y'all have a very, very, very busy couple of months. Definitely Jessica let me know. So I'm glad I slid right in before things ramped up. So I thank y'all for giving me well over an hour and 30 minutes of y'all time. I appreciate it.
No, thanks so much for having us. We love what you're doing. It's really important. Thanks, Greg.
Nah.
Yeah, second.
No doubt. So how can everybody reach out to y'all and find more information about New York on Tech and what I do? Where can we find y'all on social media?
Yeah, we're on almost every single platform. And so you can find us at NewYorkOnTech.org. You can find us on Facebook.com/New York on Tech, Twitter at New York on Tech, Instagram at New York on Tech, Medium at New York on Tech. There's no way that you can't access us should you need to be in touch.
Yep. So Minority Trailblazer Nation, y'all heard it. I'm going to have everything in the show notes where y'all can find out about more of the great work they're doing and possibly get in contact with them. So from the bottom of my heart and Minority Trailblazer Nation heart, we want to say thank you again. And
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Nah, no problem. Minority Trailblazer Nation, you already know I need y'all to do two things and two things only. One, make sure you leave us a review on iTunes. If you're on SoundCloud, follow us, share with a friend, do all that good stuff. And sec, don't you ever forget to change the freaking culture. Good night.